Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to our distinguished panelists and everyone joining us on Zoom and on YouTube. It is my great pleasure to welcome you at this event to launch the VCDNP Task Force report and recommendations on expanding peaceful uses of nuclear science and technology. A year ago, the VCDNP established a task force of high-level experts to consider the challenges and the opportunities to expanding peaceful uses to address global development challenges, while maintaining non-proliferation and nuclear security objectives. Today marks the conclusion of this work. The task force made recommendations to the IAEA, its member states, and industry. It also made recommendations for consideration by the states parties to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons for consideration in preparation for the 10th NPT Review Conference, which will finally take place next month. To frame these recommendations to the NPT Review Conference, we invited the President-Designate Ambassador Gustavo Zlauvinen to say a few words about his consultations with state parties and the experiences for the review and the expectations for the review conference. The task force worked in close contact with the IAEA and experts in consideration of its recommendations for the IAEA and its member states. An overview of these recommendations was provided during the IAEA General Conference in September. To frame the further discussion of the task force report, it is important to hear from the agency, and we have therefore asked Deputy Director General Najat Mokhtar to reflect on the challenges and opportunities to improve access to peaceful nuclear science and applications, and to contribute to achieving sustainable development goals. I would ask participants, please, to submit your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen and not the chat function. And for our Zoom participants, please email questions to events@vcdnp.org, and we will address the questions at the end of the presentations. We have Ambassador Zlauvinen, who is joining us from his car. He's been very busy, as you can well imagine, and he's taking a well-deserved break with his family. And so we are very thankful for the opportunity to have him with us. And after he has made his opening remarks, he will have to depart on the rest of his holiday. So thank you so much, Ambassador Zlauvinen, for taking the time, and I hand the floor to you.
Thank you very much. And it's a true pleasure to be participating in this very important meeting today. I want to thank the Vienna Center for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation for this amazing initiative. And I want to congratulate each and every single member of the task force for an amazing job that you have done. I read the report, I read the recommendations, and I believe that there is so much that state parties, member states, and institutions can do to further progress in the peaceful applications of nuclear science and technology. With regard to the NPT Review Conference, and you correctly pointed out, finally we are going to be meeting in 3 weeks from now, and there is a high rate of expectations about what we can achieve. What I can tell you is that throughout my consultations, I heard a growing number of state parties to the NPT that they have a genuine interest in making the NPT review process as a platform in which we can work together with civil society, with industry, with institutions, international organizations, regional organizations, to further achieve this goal, which at the end of the day, it's an integral and important element of the grand bargain that the NPT it is. At the end of the day, it was the Atoms for Peace proposal by President Roosevelt that triggered that concept of furnishing and promoting the peaceful applications of nuclear energy. And now I think we like to use the terms nuclear applications of science, nuclear science and technology. And that, just motivated later on, obviously, the establishment of the IAEA and obviously the NPT from a non-proliferation disarmament point of view. But today we can include also nuclear safety and security. So I believe that growing interest by a large number of state parties is going to make that the issue of the peaceful applications at this upcoming review conference is going to be considered from a different angle. It's not that have been overlooked in the past. It may be undervalued, I will say that, in previous review conferences, vis-a-vis the other two pillars, obviously non-proliferations, and had a lot of weight in previous review conferences, as well as nuclear disarmament, and rightly so, and it will continue to have preeminence because there are issues that are directly related to international peace and security. But however, the third element of that grand bargain, which is peaceful applications, is going to, and I hope so, is going to play a more important role in the upcoming review conference. When I took up the job as a President-Designate exactly almost 2 years ago, and talking to now DG Grossi, and he was then the President-Designate of the review conference, we were discussing about what should be the priority of the Argentine presidency of the NPT. And we agreed that, just fostering better discussions on what the NPT can do on peaceful applications was our common goal. And I think just he and later on myself, as Argentine presidency of the NPT review conference, we have been promoting that. And we encountered an amazing response. Obviously, what the Center have done is fantastic, but also UNODA co-organizing with other institutions, a series of webinars, regional webinars dealing with peaceful applications. Wilton Park, the UK government, the Dutch government, the US, and others have already taken up the challenge. And I believe that we are very prepared before this review conference to deal with this important issue. And obviously, I'm not going to be reiterated what you all know about just the growing role of peaceful nuclear applications in global priorities, from sustainable development to climate change and to dealing with global health emergencies such as the COVID and what the agency is doing, and that is fantastic. So as I said before, I do believe that the NPT's position as a platform to facilitate the benefits of these technologies could add a new dimension to the treaty and further centralizing its importance in international relations. So, and I fully agree with the recommendations that the review conference is an opportunity to further raise awareness about the spectrum of benefits provided by the peaceful uses of nuclear science and technology to the widest possible audience, as DG Grossi said, to enlarge, to have a bigger table. And I fully agree with all the recommendations to bring on the development departments at our own capitals, to bring not just international financial institutions that they don't see nuclear energy or nuclear applications as green or that just open for financing, but also to policymakers back in our capital to better understand how these applications can meet their individual needs. At the end of the day, we are talking about development needs by countries, in particular for the least developed countries, but also for a growing number of countries that are looking into these technologies. And also the conference could also be a place in which to engage industry and practitioners on how they can assist in the implementation of Article 4. At the end of the day, we have that obligation. But also the review conference could seek to ensure the long-term security and viability of the agency's technical cooperation program, and the amazing thing they're doing it, but it's not enough. We should not duplicate what they're doing. We should support them. We shouldn't just create synergies, and also encourage all states in a position to do so, to make additional contributions, but also to tap into different lines of funding that they do exist, and they are unavailable to a project related to peaceful nuclear applications. And I think this could be could include both financial and in-kind contributions, such as targeted capacity building. And in your report, you made a very strong point about that. And throughout the consultations and in the webinars that I attended to, that was one main concern by many countries about the lack of just capacity and therefore the need for capacity building, but it have to be sustained throughout the time. You cannot do it a project for a couple of years and then forget about that country, and so you have to continue with that. And also the conference could pledge to identify gaps in the provision of technical assistance and develop a practical strategy amongst the parties for how to fill those gaps. And again, helping the agency. And in that sense, also, I welcome the recommendations of the panel, because also goes into that line. So I'm going to stop now here. I have just to continue driving, but I'm going to put on mute, and I would like to keep listening to all the comments, and of course my good old friends Labbe and all this amazing job. So if you don't mind, I will keep listening to all of you, but I have to continue driving to pick up my family. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Zlauvinen. And thank you for highlighting the expectations of many countries that peaceful uses will play a more prominent role at this NPT review conference. And of course, the importance of us as the non-proliferation community sending a message to international community that peaceful uses has a role to play in sustainable development, achieving its sustainable development goals. So we will now hand the floor to Deputy Director General Najat Mokhtar, and she is the head of the Department of Nuclear Science and Applications, and will talk to us about the challenges and opportunities for the IAEA and its member states to improve the contribution of peaceful nuclear science and applications to sustainable development goals. Najat?
Thank you, Ingrid, and good afternoon, everybody. I really appreciate and welcome the increased focus on peaceful use of nuclear technology and the particular effort made by the task force to promote further the use and the contribution of nuclear technologies to SDGs. I'm not here to respond to the recommendations, but rather just provide some points as a food for thought. As you know, over the last decades, nuclear techniques have proven to have a unique role in addressing development challenges in many areas, and of course, human health, potable water, food security, environmental monitoring. And IAEA has played really key role in transferring the technology to the member states, particularly the developing countries, building the capacity, providing technical expertise, and enhancing the infrastructure. So, and we know that nuclear technology, as has been mentioned by His Excellency the Ambassador, the role of nuclear technology in contributing to at least 9 of the SDGs is really obvious, and one of example is human health. Nuclear technology contributes throughout the whole spectrum of human health, from prevention to diagnosis, treatment. And yet, 23 countries in Africa, they don't have radiotherapy. And those that they have facilities, radiotherapy facilities, they can't cover even 50% of the population. So this is something that should be addressed, and we cannot just look at this without doing anything. And that's why our Director General will launch an initiative early next year called Rays of Hope that calls for partnership and support to not leaving any country behind without access to cancer treatment through radiotherapy. Another example is again in food security and the example of sterile insect control and the success that has been made in Latin America, particularly saving livelihood of farmers that cost about billions of dollars. And even the recent example in Senegal about tsetse flies that also brought farmers back when the tsetse fly has been eradicated from that region, and the farmers could come back and have better livelihood. So those are examples that should be looked at even deeply and evaluated in economic way in terms of cost effectiveness and return in terms of life productivity, years of life and productivity. And I can go on with other examples. And just in recent pandemic, the COVID-19, that member state turned to the agency asking for support. And we have provided support to more than 130 countries. So there is, I must say, there is a conscious, or there is a knowledge that the IAEA can help, but only when we have this emergency situation, Ebola, SMERS, other diseases, where then the request, and even flooding that happened in Latin America, or some pollution in ocean in Asia and Pacific. And then we react immediately and we provide support. But on continuous basis, we need to analyze that more deeply. And again, going back to COVID-19, after that, DG has said we need to ensure, if member states are asking us support, that means they are not ready, not well prepared for pandemic. And that's why he initiated the Zodiac project, which aims really to build this sustained capabilities in all laboratories in member states to be able to detect emerging and re-emerging zoonotic disease and somehow stop the pandemic. So those are, I think we need to think big. We have built the capability. Now we need to go to another step, another level. And Zodiacs or Rays of Hopes are the other level. Those are few examples. Again, Ambassador mentioned climate change, and we know that the role of nuclear technology is very important. What are, for examples? I was talking to my colleague yesterday, and she was saying, if a bank give money to a country to go and dig boreholes in a country to look for water, you can dig the borehole with that money, but you are not sure that you will find water. However, if you use the technology, you can immediately know where is the water and how much is this water and how long that water will be sustained. So these are cost-effective information that will just save time and money. And similarly, with ocean pollution, plastic monitoring, for example, we know the role of nuclear technology. We held roundtables all around the world saying that we can help in plastic monitoring and in plastic recycling using nuclear technology, either downstream in the ocean, monitoring microplastic, or upstream using radiation technology to enhance the recycling process and contribute to this to the economy of plastics. So those are a few examples, and this is another, again, big initiative called New Tech Plastic on how we can contribute to the global strategy against plastic pollution. Again, I can go on as examples, but as mentioned in the report, but also as mentioned by the ambassador, the challenges ahead. Why nuclear technology is not part of the solution immediately in strategic planning, and what should we do about it? I think we know that the word nuclear is misleading, is the word that we need to talk more about the benefits of nuclear technology, that nuclear can save lives, nuclear saves. And this is a discussion that we need to do more and more with at the decision-making level. We need to unlock, obviously, bigger funding. We are not funding agency, we are technical agency. We do our job, and once the technology transferred is to the member state also to speak up and to speak to their policymakers. I was in my country using the technology in nutrition and public health against micronutrient deficiency, iron deficiency, like anemia, for example. And I had to demonstrate that the technology helps in telling to the member state, to the government, which type of iron they should add into the food, the flour, for example, to overcome anemia in the country. So as a scientist, I had my role to play. And I think this is a call to all the scientists that they believe in the technology to talk to the policymaker. And then the government should request the use of nuclear technology in their strategic planning. Talking to the funding bodies, and we should be around the table when member states is talking to banks, to development agencies. We should be there as contributor as well. As a global level, of course, Ambassador mentioned capacity, human capacity. Definitely there is a need. And that's why, again, DG came up with the Marie Curie Fellowship to promote more women in science. And I think that's an initiative that should be supported to ensure this mass in human resources. And then last point, coming from a department that promotes research and development, I think if we continue ignoring research, at the end, we won't have any new technologies to be developed to transfer to the member states. And I give just one example. So, you know, food irradiation, before you need a huge installation close to the airport to irradiate food before it's exported. Now, the irradiator is small equipment, bench equipment at the farm level that the farmer himself or herself can use at farmer level. So we need to promote research. We need to promote R&D activities to fine-tune tools, fine-tune technologies that are adaptive to the need of the countries and the conditions of the countries and the absorption capacities of the countries. So I will stop here. Unfortunately, I can't stay longer because I have to run to another meeting, but I'll be happy to listen for a half hour to other discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, DDG Mokhtar. Yeah, it's been a hard 2 years for the world, and with regard to non-proliferation challenges and with the COVID pandemic, but it's been an exciting time in many ways for the IAEA and for peaceful uses, because there is a focus on large-scale projects, on changing hearts and minds around nuclear and peaceful uses, and creating the kind of awareness as you have been doing in so many other forums that I've had the privilege of participating in. And every time I listen to you, I just hear new ways that the agency is contributing and peaceful uses is making a contribution. So thank you for that, and thank you for highlighting the challenges in this regard. And thank you for taking the time as well to be with us today. I'm going to hand the floor now to Ambassador Labbe. He is our distinguished task force chair, and he was the previously the ambassador of Chile to Vienna. Ambassador Labbe, I hand the floor to you.
Thank you, Ingrid. Dear colleagues, dear friends, warm greetings from Santiago. Today is for us a day of celebration. We are celebrating the product of our efforts for more than 1 year. We are, of course, celebrating leadership because we are exercising leadership through the recommendations that we are forwarding to everyone. We are celebrating an open kind of participation, an inclusive exercise that convened diplomats, civil international servants, members of academia, NGOs, activists, former members of the IAEA, and activists everywhere in the world, but particularly in Africa, and members of different organizations and industry. We are celebrating a reaffirmation of nuclear energy and its peaceful applications by raising awareness and moving forward as a real response to many challenges that humanity is facing today. We are celebrating and underlining, the strong connection with human security, and in particular, from that conceptual point of view, to sustainable development. And I'm so happy that DDG Mokhtar encouraged us to think big. Well, we are thinking big, and the set of recommendations are well targeted to the IAEA, to member states, but also to industry in terms of thinking big. Big in terms of our intentions, big in terms of the possibilities, but big also in terms of the necessary activity, the necessary energy that we need to inject in our organizations to move forward this agenda. So we are using the nuclear option. And you know that word, that expression is used with negative overtones, but not in this case. The nuclear option is a real option. That is why we're asking the DG from the IAEA and the UN Secretary General to convene a high-level event in the United Nations to move nuclear applications to the center of the global agenda, where it belongs, believe me. And you will be convinced by just reading the recommendations. But I cannot end my intervention without thanking so many people. Of course, the members of the task force, our colleagues from Vienna and other places, ambassadors, officials and former officials of the IAEA and other regional organizations, members of the academia, including those that provided very substantial documents on paper, people from the public sector and the industry. And of course, we all contributed to a sustained, serious effort to distill recommendations that are both significant but pragmatical at the same time. I cannot end without singing the praises of the VCDNP. In a way, that's our home, even my home in Vienna. And of course, remembering the Holy See in Monterey. Of course, we are all very proud of the Vienna Center and the wonderful, wonderful team that has been sustaining, animating, and leading us into the final production of this wonderful document that we have there. Of course, I'm biased, I'm not neutral. It is wonderful. You will see it. Now, my greetings to DDG Mokhtar, and of course to my good friend Gustavo, who is redefining the meaning of ambulatory diplomacy. So thank you, Ingrid, thank you, Elena, for all the work, and I hope that we'll have a wonderful meeting, a wonderful session, including by answering some questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Labbe, and thank you for your incredible positive energy. This has been such a fantastic experience working with you on developing these recommendations. You've led the task force with such gusto, and it's really been fantastic. Thank you so much. And now I'm going to hand over to Elena Sokova. She's our Executive Director, and I'm sure you all know her well. And she will present the recommendations and the report. Elena.
Thank you, Alfredo, for really energizing our audience for the recommendations and the findings of the work of the task force. It would be a tall task for me to match your eloquency, and as well as many of the members of the task force. For those of you who have been following us, we had a preliminary rollout of the recommendations during the IAEA general conference this fall, and several of the members of the task force spoke at the event. So it would be indeed hard for me to match their skills in presenting the information, but I'll try to do my best. I'm really grateful that DDG Mokhtar and Ambassador Zlauvinen already provided us with a lot of background about the issues, about the challenges and opportunities we face. So with your permission, I will dive into the recommendations themselves. So let me, I cannot share my slides. So if Noah could bring them up, that would be great.
Elena, try again. My apologies.
Okay. Okay, I do. I can share them. Okay, perfect. So let me kind of say a few words before we focus on the recommendations themselves. First and foremost, I want to note that the recommendation, when the task force was considering the recommendations and looking into the issues, we realized that, and we fully agree with the notion that the International Atomic Energy is a key and integral partner and plays the leading role in not only transferring the technologies, but also playing a leading role in assisting states in building capacity, but also providing guidance on safety, security, and safeguards issues to ensure the sustainability of their use. And but the work of the agency is very much defined by what the member states need and how they use the services and assistance provided by the agency. And that's no wonder that the majority of our recommendations are focused on the International Atomic Energy Agency, its member states, but also on some other stakeholders that play a role in it, including the industry and other stakeholders, academia, regional organizations, and so forth. So in my presentation, I will focus on some of the key findings, overview of some of the recommendations to the IAEA member states and industry, and also recommendations for the upcoming 10th NPT review conference. So as was already noted by Ambassador Labbe, and as we've heard from DDG Mokhtar, is that the application of peaceful nuclear science and technology could be much better and wider utilized. And that actually is something that we thought that this really underpins the findings of the work of the task force. And particularly, we want to stress that we are very united in seeing that these peaceful nuclear applications can and should contribute more to the implementation of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, particularly in health, climate smart, agriculture, industrial development, environmental monitoring, and many other applications. You've heard of wonderful examples from DDG Mokhtar just before my presentation. But it also became clear, and we also hear it from the agency, from the member states, that key impediments are limited resources, lack of awareness of the benefits themselves, and in inadequate capacity to use them or expand their use. We also thought that in order for the increased and enhanced use of peaceful uses, we need to have all different parties at the table. And the agency itself, its member states, NPT state parties, international and regional organizations, development agencies, academia, industry, non-governmental experts, and the public all have a role to play in ensuring further use and development of nuclear technologies. And as already been highlighted by Ambassador Zlauvinen, we find that it's extremely important to provide continued and strengthened support to the IAEA and to its key and integral role in facilitating peaceful uses and in providing supports in safe, secure, and sustainable use of these applications. Okay. We grouped our recommendations in 4 large areas. They focus on awareness raising, where we make an emphasis on improving communications on the benefits of peaceful uses and do it in different levels, from vertically, horizontally, and with the civil society. And I explain later when we speak about specific recommendations. Obviously, we need to expand and improve partnerships and engage a wide variety of partners, including new and non-traditional partners, in the sense that they have not been tapped earlier to be engaged in these conversations. We also were united in seeing that the safety, security, and safeguards are integral for sustainable applications of nuclear science and technologies, and should support and facilitate access to peaceful uses for all countries, and also to strengthen public confidence in nuclear science technology and its applications. We also felt strongly that sustainability and access to technology are an integral part of the approach to the expansion and better use of peaceful use applications. Therefore, we recommended adding sustainability as a 4th S to the concept of 3 S's that include safety, security, and safeguards, to build the capacity and ensure that peaceful uses and nuclear technology are effective, accessible, and user-friendly, particularly to developing countries. Now to a little bit more diving into some of the recommendations. We felt strongly that the IAEA and member states should focus their outreach and awareness raising efforts on nuclear applications that have demonstrated their benefits, their effectiveness, economic advantages, and showcase this success story at relevant events. In this respect, that the examples that Najat provided are some of the highlights, but they're not as well known beyond the regular kind of set of players that we all are familiar with. But we also need to use some of these success stories in a much more creative way. For example, with the promotion of cancer treatment and related programs, we thought that it could really benefit from specific events and campaigns where we could bring some respected influencers. And what we mean by that, when we discussed it within the task force, one of the ideas was, when you bring, say, spouses of heads of states and demonstrate the capabilities of the cancer treatments using nuclear technology, that may actually be an extremely influential experience. Same could be some of the celebrities that work in the area. And indeed, it is something that really need to be promoted and addressed. As DG Mokhtar noted, that 23 countries in Africa that don't have any of these equipment and technology to deal with cancer. But even more, even countries that have them, they still are not meeting their needs. The agency and the member states should also invite and include policymakers and experts from various sectors and international organizations in various IAEA high-level events. And here we should expand, not to include just Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministers of Energy and Science, but also representatives from the health sector, from those dealing with the implications for the environment and so forth. So in this respect, we could increase the exposure to other policymakers, avoid silencing of nuclear issues in our kind of traditional circle. And ministerial conferences the IAEA hosts on nuclear science and technology are also one of the potential events. There are also regional events, similar regional events could be held as well. What also have Najat mentioned is that the nuclear peaceful uses need to be part of the strategic planning in nation states. And the need to mainstream peaceful uses in national policy and development frameworks is another of the recommendations of the task force. For that, we certainly think that improved intergovernmental cooperation is required. The engagement with development agencies and regional financial institutions that could support individual project or regional projects. The IAEA could also better utilize some of the amazing facilities it has where it could show and demonstrate the nuclear applications and capabilities, be it in the Cybersdorf in Vienna, when some of these ministers and high-level decision makers come to Vienna, and also in Monaco. The IAEA and member states obviously should continue outreach to school and higher education institutions and encourage careers in nuclear to foster a better understanding of nuclear science and technologies. And as already been mentioned, partnership and expanding cooperation and coordination are extremely important. In order to bring additional parties to the table and strengthen that collaboration, we felt that the IAEA Director General need to engage more extensively with counterparts at different agencies, development agencies, various international organizations, including a host of the UN family organizations, WHO and others, international and regional financial institutions, and encourage these organizations to engage with the IAEA and other stakeholders on peaceful uses. One of the examples we thought where it could be a little bit more specific recommendation is for the IAEA to establish a joint division with WHO to ensure that the capacities of the two organizations are fully utilized. Here we'll look more at the example of the IAEA and the Food and Agriculture Organization having a joint division, and where we see some very useful results of that cooperation. Further on expanding and improving partnerships, we think that the member states with IAEA assistance should prepare requests for development assistance applications with a clear demonstration of benefits and effectiveness of peaceful use application. And that would also help to have clear and well-defined monitoring and evaluation mechanisms built into the project. to both demonstrate the benefits and to ensure accountability, and obviously use them as a potential demonstration of these benefits for future funding. It's important to have joint programs developed by member states, relevant partners, and the agency, and clearly define both needs and the roles and contributions of each partner in these projects. And in order to maximize the impact, we thought that it would be very important to consider multi-country projects, particularly within the same region. That would definitely increase the scope and scale of the project and maximize the use of resources. But overall, we felt that there need to be a better South and South cooperation, sharing of experiences, best practices. Member states should support and provide regional organizations with the resources to fulfill their mandate in peaceful uses. Sometimes that it is the not very well thought about, or the engagement is not yet at the needed level for the regional organizations to play their role in peaceful uses. There should be twinning or mentorship that needs to be encouraged both by member states and the agency, including for institutions that are responsible for research, training, education, regulatory authorities, and so forth. And obviously, there should be big support to engage youth and women's organization in peaceful uses. Now to sustainability and access to technology. Because as already been mentioned by Najat, is that it's not just a one-off. You provide a technology or one training, and that's it. There need to be a concerted effort to ensure that the technologies are used, and that the use of the application is growing, and there are the opportunities that could be utilized. But we need to focus on making sure that there is increased ownership and expanded capacity to utilize them, and at the same time improve access to these technologies for countries. The International Atomic Energy Agency should emphasize a comprehensive approach and cross-agency collaboration in designing and implementing country-specific programs. We thought that the use of national country program frameworks and coordinated research projects are important tools to increase that comprehensive and cross-agency approach. And member states should improve national processes and cross-sector coordination to identify priorities areas and technology needs, and make better use of IAEA tools and assistance, including through these two country program framework and coordinated research programs. Very important to focus in addressing sustainability and access to technology, to invest in capacity building for peaceful users. The International Atomic Energy should continue to invest and promote further capacity building in member states, including through professional development programs and educational and training programs and fellowships. And I cannot praise enough the initiative that DDG took when he established the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Fellowship Program. I'm already a witness of many great young women that are coming to the field and taking advantage of this fellowship to further engage and build their expertise and capacity. We also thought that while building that capacity, member states need to ensure that there are opportunities for students and to young specialists to apply their skills and expertise at home, as well as at regional, as well as through the regions. We also thought that the member states should really support the work of regional networks on education and training in nuclear science and technology, and various excellent centers that already exist. These training centers could be not only like dedicated, but within hospitals, universities, as well as other opportunities. Another big aspect of sustainability and access to technology is to address challenges related to transportation of radioactive materials. This is one of the areas identified by the in the discussion that we have both with the agency and with representative from member states. There are still challenges in a transportation of materials, in shipping them, in receiving them, traveling through countries. In this regard, it's extremely important to promote better understanding of the application of the IAEA regulatory documents related to transport of radioactive material, improve communication among all the involved parties, from regulators, state carriers, shipping companies, and so forth, the entire supply chain. Harmonize regulations among the countries, and including the implementation, and develop and update national legislation to reflect IAEA standards and international practices. Another important aspect of sustainability and access to technology is ensuring access to technology itself and to alternative technologies that are available. We welcome the member states to consider non-isotopic technologies where they're technically and economically feasible. But member states that promote alternative technology should consider conditions which may require continued use of radioactive source-based technology. This is one of the issues that we felt really strongly, that sometimes the availability of alternative technologies is constrained because of the costs of these technologies, or because of them not being able to work in a harsh environment and conditions that are in many of the developing countries in the South, particularly Africa or Asia. In this respect, it would be important for the agency and member states to collaborate with research centers and laboratories that develop this non-isotopic technology and ensure that it really meets the conditions on the ground, so that they are not only easy to maintain, that they're effective, they're efficient, and that the costs are not prohibitive. And finally, the big chunk of our recommendations to the IAEA and its member states is focused on nuclear non-proliferation, safety and security, and fostering future culture in these three areas. First and foremost, we thought that the universalization of all relevant legal instruments, treaties, and conventions is extremely important. We encourage the use of IAEA services for assessment, advisory, and peer review missions in safety and security area. We encourage IAEA member states to promote information exchange about nuclear security measures, while protecting the confidentiality of this information. It is extremely important that there is a confidence in the public to the degree that the strengthened and well-articulated information about the measures in safe and secure use of nuclear technology could only strengthen the confidence in these technologies and their further use. At the same time, we felt that it's extremely important to think about the differences in some of the applications and some of the current capacity of the member states. And sometimes it would be really important to have a more gradual and organic approach to how we assess the nuclear security infrastructure and implementation particularly in low and middle income countries. Therefore, we recommended that IAEA and member states together develop a voluntary, non-discriminatory and transparent mechanism to validate the implementation of IAEA nuclear safety, security guidance and instruments. That would really facilitate a better kind of acknowledgement of countries meeting the requirements for technology, particularly specific technologies that may be used. It also is important to have a better understanding for member states about some of the new technologies, including small modular reactors and advanced reactors. And therefore, both the agency and member states should work with the industry to make sure that they understand all these requirements and also ensure the early safeguardability of some of these technologies, as well as considerations for safety and security. And finally, the set of our recommendations is focused on the 10th NPT review conference and state parties to the NPT. And we already made a strong focus on the need to highlight success stories and contributions of peaceful users of using nuclear technology. And I think the 10th Review Conference is one of these most immediate opportunities, and that opportunity hopefully will be seized by many parties coming to the conference in January and highlighting the specific contributions and including their contributions to the sustainable development goals. And we hope that there is a final outcome document at the review conference, and hopefully we would see a clear connection between peaceful uses and the sustainable development goals in these documents, and that the state parties reaffirm support for cooperation on peaceful uses with attention to the needs of low and middle income countries first and foremost, and pledge continuing funding to the technical cooperation fund at the IAEA and other extra budgetary resources, but also maybe also bring some very concrete pledges of their contributions. That would be really important for not only highlighting during the deliberations at the conference, but also in the final outcome documents. State parties should also encourage the inclusion of peaceful uses, particularly non-power applications in national development plans. That would be an important for them, for parties coming back from the conference to communicate these outcomes and decisions to various relevant development agencies across their governments, and highlighting the contributions to the sustainable development. And we've already started, Ambassador Labbe, with this recommendation. Is we do feel very strongly, the task force was unanimous, that it is a high time to have a very high-level event that is called by the UN Secretary General and the IAEA Director General that highlights the successes and opportunities of peaceful uses, to raise the salience of the issues among all stakeholders worldwide. There were 4 conferences held on peaceful uses in the 60s, 70s. The last conference on cooperation on peaceful uses, UN conference, was in 1987. And I think it's an opportune time to have that discussion again at a high level. And finally, before I close, I really want to give thanks to our very energetic and always inspiring chair of the task force, Ambassador Alfredo Labbe, but also to all the members of the task force, Ambassador Lena Al-Hadid, Ambassador Hamad Al-Kabi, Ambassador Kirsten Anderson, Mr. Masoud Baliomer, Mr. Vilmos Cherveni, Ms. Diti Bovada Goma, Ambassador Benna Lagner, Mr. Aldo Malavazi, Dr. Anita Nilsson, Ms. Sharon Squassoni, and Ambassador Morakat Srisvazdi, as well as to current and former experts in the IAEA, non-governmental and industry representatives who shared expertise and insights with all of us. And obviously, last but not least, to our own VCDNP team, particularly Ingrid Kirsten. Many of you will see her paper as an attachment to the task force. She has been our kind of inspiration and driver of this discussion over the years, but also my great colleagues Noah Mayhew, Mara Zarkar, and all of our interns that help facilitate the discussion, right? Take notes and work on finalizing this report. And I would remiss if I don't mention the Carnegie Corporation of New York for their financial support to the work of the task force. With that, I'm really encouraging everyone online to read the report itself. There is much more than I was able to cover in that short period. And now I'm giving the microphone back to Ingrid for facilitation of the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elena. Brilliantly presented. And as Elena says, it is a very comprehensive report, and we really encourage you to read it and to engage with us also in future events in this regard. We have some questions, and I wanted to just remind everyone that you can pose your questions on the Q&A function. And for those of you on Zoom, you can send us an email with your questions at event@vcdnp.org. That's event@vcdnp.org. So the questions, we have a question from Rafael Moreto, who asks about the exclusion of, or the inclusion rather, of industry and industrial players, and how to close the gap and ensure that they can contribute more. I think some of the questions, the answers have already been given in the process, I think, of our Elena's presentation of the recommendations. But there we are, that question. And also he points out that expanding peaceful uses can contribute to strengthening non-proliferation and security goals. Then we have Professor Shemelis from the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, who says that that these nuclear technologies, what is the adoption rate of them in member states, notably in developing countries, and how can this adoption rate be enhanced? And then we have Vilmos Chevigny, who is one of our task force members, and he asks a question there about how we can further disseminate the report, and suggests that perhaps the VCDNP can engage with the IAEA DG and the chair of the board to find ways to share these recommendations with the agency's constituency. And then we have a question from Peter Fleissner about the problem of long-term nuclear waste management. Has this been solved? And if so, yes. So I'm going to turn back to our panelists. Shall we start with Ambassador Labbe?
Thank you, Ingrid. I want to address the question, and more than a question, in fact, a recommendation forwarded by our good friend Vilmos. Yes, I believe that now comes the time when countries interested in this process, interested in a successful NPT review conference, must exercise their leadership by moving these recommendations among their own constituencies. I'm talking about regional constituencies. And in this respect, in Latin America, for instance, we are blessed by the existence of an organization, which is the OPANAL, which was created by the Tlatelolco Treaty, that is one of the vehicles that we can use for dissemination. But more than that, political dissemination requires, as Vilmos states, the mobilization of political groupings such as the G77. And the G77 here is crucial because G77 was one of the main forces behind the adoption of the 2030 agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. In fact, it was one of the main negotiating parties of that set of recommendations, which is more than a set of recommendations. In fact, it is an organizing paradigm for the whole of the multilateral system. So I am all for that kind of approach, and I have seen in the participants distinguished ambassadors, members of the missions in Vienna, including the Chilean ambassador, a very good friend. So here I pass on to them maybe the possibility of considering with their governments the idea of moving these recommendations as a kind of a set of ideas that is the result of a very thorough discussion, a very inclusive discussion. Here, this notion of inclusiveness is very important, both in terms of gender, but in terms of political affiliations, not only member states, but also NGOs, also academia, also the international organizations, even convening members or former officials of those organizations. This is very important. And I believe some of these recommendations are really extraordinarily useful. And I suppose that in the regional dimension, which I was mentioning, for instance, in the case of Africa, it's very important what member states can do. And well, I'll stop there. Thank you. Thank you, Ingrid.
Thank you. Elena, would you like to answer some of those questions? You're muted.
Questions that you asked, but I want to chime into what Ambassador Labbe has already said is about the importance of taking it to relevant regional organizations and domestically to various players within the government, not just kind of your regular immediate kind of peace and security community, so to speak. When we discussed within the task force, it was really revealing that even when development aid departments are within the same ministry, that it's not necessarily that they speak to each other. Those that deal with security and multilateralism issues. And it's even more the case when they're into different governmental departments, that bridge needs to be crossed. And in this respect, I want to give an example. One of our task force members, Ambassador Srisvasti, when she was back in home country for vacation, actually for leave, she actually reached out to the original development bank to speak about some of the opportunities that these technologies may provide. And I think that that's a great example of how many of the ambassadors and officials at the agency and in the capitals could reach out across these divides to other parts of their governments, to the higher level. It's not a kind of a surprise that in Vienna, many of us working in this field are much better informed about these applications and their uses, but that's not the case that is true for other parts of the government, particularly development agencies and financial institutions. It was rightly noted that nuclear sometimes carries that stigma, either associated with nuclear weapons or with Chernobyl or Fukushima. But there is so much more, particularly non-power applications that are the least controversial in this regard. And there should certainly be it's an easier conversation to have, particularly when you can demonstrate benefits, be it the health benefits or the agriculture and food security benefits that will lead to it. In terms of where next with the recommendations, I think the task force members and the VCDNP would be very open to any suggestions. If there is interest for us to bring the presentation and the recommendation and have a discussion, be it at regional forums or at the IAEA or within the UN system, we would be really happy to do that. And if there are good proposals, I'd be happy to entertain them. And I'm sure Ambassador Labbe would also support that.
Thank you. And I think this is exactly to Professor Shirmalise's question and also the comments by Rafael Mareto in terms of the adoption of technologies in developing countries and also how to expand that adoption is that at the basis of this, we don't have, there is not enough awareness about the benefits of these technologies, as Elena and Ambassador Labbe and everyone on the call has said so far. So this is putting the focus more on what is positive and the work that is being done by the IAEA and so many countries in the world to bring about really the full potential of peaceful uses. And we have a long way to go, but this is, you know, science and technology, which the development of which is and the constant evolution of it, if we invest in it and invest in its adoption in developing countries, can make such a big difference between developing and to close that gap between developing and developed countries. And we also have a question that has come in from Charles Johnson, the Program Director of International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War. And he notes that, asks that has there been consideration of seeking support for less controversial peaceful uses of nuclear technology in the NPT RevCon statement, or I guess outcome, such as the use in medicine, as opposed to seeking blanket support, which would likely fail. Ambassador Labbe, what is your opinion?
Well, of course, it's up to the member states and states parties to the NPT to move forward the discussion on any issue, on any subject. I know that increasingly the review conference is opening up to the participation of civil society and of organizations, NGOs, which are very, very active and with very deep understanding of all the problems related to nuclear applications. As of course, they are normally very vocal and very loyal advocates of nuclear disarmament. And here, by the way, let me pass a piece of advertisement. This is to inform that our Noah Mayhew from the VCDNP has been declared the winner of the 2021 Leonard Reason Award by his article, "A Millennial's View, ICBM Are Ridiculous." This is from the bulletin of atomic scientists in the US. So there you are, there you are, you see how civil society, how NGOs are working in different networks and are advancing the cause of nuclear disarmament. But here we need to concentrate more in these peaceful applications. And let me tell you, I have been following all the debates pertaining to the crisis in energy that now you are living in Europe and other places. And it is one of the conclusions by the International Energy Agency that in order to achieve zero carbon energy in somewhere in the future, nuclear energy will be absolutely indispensable. So we need to remove ghosts. So we need to do some exorcisms here and return to a serious, to an objective debate of all applications of nuclear energy. This is important. This is very important for developing countries as well. If you think about the scarcities in water, the role water is going to play in peace and international security in the future, then you realize that everything should be put together in a way that sustains international security and peace and advances human you through development, because this is an integral part of security. So to all of you out there that are much interested in the cause of nuclear disarmament, the cause of nuclear non-proliferation, I tell you, this is an integral and integrated objective. So it's very easy, for the sake of analysis or even political discussion, to divide the pillars and to say something in this pillar or something different in other pillars. Everything is integrated. So in order to advance nuclear disarmament or nuclear proliferation, you don't need to sacrifice peaceful applications. In fact, it would be criminal to do that, because peaceful applications are paramount, are really important and significant to advance human security everywhere in the world, but particularly in the developing countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elena.
Back to that question about the nuclear energy blanket kind of use of the term, or using like non-power applications. It's a good question. We actually, in our task force, we spend a lot of time discussing nuclear energy, particularly from the angle of their availability for developing countries and least developed countries. And one of the key kind of impediments in the use of nuclear energy is primarily comes from its costs. It's the something that is really prohibitive for many countries. Obviously, then comes the infrastructure, the ability to use the nuclear power from the current kind of scale of nuclear power plants. In this respect, small modular reactors do have a promise, but as we also had discussion, is like their costs are likely to be lower, but not cheap enough, let me put it this way, first of all. And second of all, these technologies are still, even though they move to more advanced development stages, they're still not yet available, and it will take time before they become available. So what we thought in the discussions, that we focused mostly on the technologies that are already well known and they have already demonstrated that their benefits. And many of them are actually in non-power applications and use radioactive materials and sometimes nuclear materials as well. So that's one thing. But I think that it's probably also an area where the outcome documents or deliberations at the NPT review conference could be a little bit more nuanced. Indeed, maybe lumping everything together is not necessarily something that nowadays we should be just using that term without being more specific of what we mean.
Thank you so much, Elena. We also have Vilmos just pointing out again and highlighting very importantly this conference that we are proposing in our recommendations, or that the task force is proposing the joint conference between the DG of the IAEA and the Secretary General of the United Nations. He's saying that hopefully the G77 and others will use the RevCon to provide some form of support for this idea, and hopefully to call on or put this in the outcome document, I would imagine, of the NPT review conference, because this would really raise the profile of peaceful uses, and among especially UN agencies where there is a lot of, the focus is not, and the consideration of nuclear is not yet what it can be to enable us to expand peaceful uses to make a real contribution to the challenges we are facing globally. We also then have a comment from the Philippines, who notes that usually nuclear applications are not labeled as such under development plans or development priorities, but rather labeled as applications in other fields, such as medicine and agriculture, which is an interesting comment because with the development, as our understanding is also with the development agencies, they often shy away from using peaceful uses or including peaceful uses in their development projects and programs, mostly because they say there is not enough, or there's not a demand from the recipient countries to do so. So it's really important for recipient countries to ask for the inclusion of peaceful uses in their development projects, as we mentioned. I'm just going to this last comment as well before I return to the panel for their closing remarks. Nuclear has to be part of the energy transition, and it is recommended from IPCC, and nuclear power contributes so much to the UN SDGs. More than any other low carbon solution, nuclear is a strong booster to infrastructure development, and national economies. So with that, I think we can turn back for closing comments and to Ambassador Labbe and to Elena Sokova. And again, just thank Ambassador Zlauvinen and DGG Mokhtar for joining us and taking the time to discuss and make some remarks on these very important issues. Just to point out again and remind you all that our report is available on the VCDNP website. So I hope you'll have the opportunity to read it, the full report and recommendations. As you see, Noah has put in the chat a link there. So please read it and let us have your comments. Ambassador Labbe, I'll turn back to you.
Thank you, Ingrid. Well, as you know, you as a creator reach a point where your product, where your oeuvre ceases to belong to you. It belongs to you in a way, but now it takes its own life. And this is a moment for further dissemination. And there, all the participants here, I mean, and I thank them all for their interest in joining us in this webinar. Now you have a responsibility to, the responsibility to disseminate. I mean, I am assuming that your interest is reflected in the fact that you have participated in this webinar, but let's move that interest a little bit further. And please help us in the dissemination. And of course, we have ended this part of the exercise, but there is a need for continued efforts in order to advance the cause. And the cause is good, is very noble. And this provides us with the moral and the life-enhancing incentives to move forward and to keep proceeding in this area of work. So thank you very much. Thanks to all. Thanks to you, Ingrid, for a wonderful moderation. And thanks to Elena for the presentation. And again, to all the colleagues that participated here. I failed to mention in my first intervention, of course, the substantial and vital contribution of the Carnegie Corporation of New York. I do it now. And of course, I mean, inviting them to continue to support this kind of activities. This is very important too. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Labbe. Elena, your last word.
If you ask me what I wish next is, many of our recommendations are kind of long-term recommendations. Maybe they're more immediate, but hopefully they will be used and discussed, particularly in the IAEA context further. And I would be happy to work with the IAEA in the different parts of it and with member states to make sure that the recommendations are well understood, or elaborate them further and see what else could be done. Then maybe start of the discussion. But for the coming NPT review conference, is my biggest hope is that not only the recommendations that I listed at the end of the presentation of all the recommendations from the task force, including the clear connection with sustainable development goals, with commitments to further cooperation and funding, supporting the role of the IAEA, and so forth. I would also really like to see, if not in the outcome document, and in this respect, it's important to have the outcome document, but even without it, it's important that parties, particularly those who can, the developed countries, bring real pledges and contributions to make a difference. One of the recommendations we had, and please read the report, there's more than what was discussed today, is it would be excellent if there is a new initiative that is launched, for example, addressing some of the needs of the least developed countries. was really excited to hear about the initiative that DDG Mokhtar mentioned about Rays of Hope. And I think that really well bodes with what we recommend in our recommendation, to focus maybe on something that is immediate, achievable, and make a huge impact. So I think that focusing on cancer radiotherapy and treatment and diagnostic is an extremely important one. So that would be my last word. Let's kind of make sure that all these recommendations really bring real, tangible, concrete results. And we'll be looking forward to working with the different stakeholders and parties and continue that conversation. And thank you, Ambassador Labbe, and all the members of the task force. Thank you, Ingrid. Congratulations, Noah, from all of us. We've been so proud of you, and thank you all supporting the work of the center and those who was with us for the last hour and a half. Ingrid, back to you.
Thank you so much, Elena. Thank you, Ambassador Labbe. And now it's up to all of the member states and the states parties to take these recommendations forward, to work within the IAEA board and to ensure that there can be a broader application, and that we can put to use these recommendations that have been so carefully considered. And we had a comment here from someone on Zoom, from YouTube, saying that they are very impressed with the fact that we came up that the task force came up with so many detailed recommendations, being from such a varied background as the task force was. And this is an absolute example of the dedication of our task force to expanding peaceful uses, to ensuring that it can achieve its highest potential. So we look forward to the outcome of the NPT and deliberations at the NPT Review Conference, and to continue this work in future with all of your support. Thank you so much, and have a lovely weekend, weekend. Goodbye. Thank you.